Resident Evil has spent 30 years showing people escape impossible outbreaks, then hiding what happened to most of them. Some became government weapons. Others vanished after saving thousands of lives, and one famous survivor had already died before his first game was even over. But there are so many more insane stories that you don't know about. So today, I'm tracking every playable or story-critical survivor and explaining what really happened to them. By the end, we should finally have an answer to one question Resident Evil keeps dodging. Did anyone escape Umbrella cleanly? The train left too. The first escape in the main timeline belongs to two people who barely knew each other when the night began. In July of 1998, STRS Bravo team medic Rebecca Chambers finds a military transport wrecked in the Arklay Mountains. The prisoners and guards inside have been torn apart. One prisoner is missing. Former Marine Second Lieutenant Billy Cohen, a man convicted of murdering 23 civilians and sentenced to death. Rebecca finds Billy aboard the Ecliptic Express. Within minutes, the train is crawling with zombies, giant insects, and leeches moving like a single body. They agree to cooperate because neither has much chance alone. And that partnership carries them through the derailed train, Umbrella's abandoned training facility, and James Marcus's very weird revenge tour. Billy eventually tells Rebecca what actually happened in Africa. His unit was ordered to attack a village after bad intelligence and a brutal march. Billy refused to take part. His commanding officer blamed the massacre on him anyway, and the military accepted the story. By the end of Resident Evil 0, Rebecca believes him. After Marcus is destroyed, Billy and Rebecca reach a hill overlooking the Spencer mansion. Rebecca removes his dog tags and tells him that officially Billy Cohen died in the mountains. He gives her a final salute and walks into the fog. That's it. That's Billy's last confirmed moment in the main continuity. There are references and scrapped ideas fans have picked apart for years, but no later game tells us where he went, whether he left the country, or whether he ever contacted Rebecca again. Legally, he has a strange kind of freedom. The authorities think he's dead. Umbrella has bigger problems. Rebecca has given him the cleanest new identity possible. No identity at all. Rebecca gets nothing close to that freedom. She looks toward the mansion and heads straight into the next disaster. She has just survived an infected train, learned that Umbrella's founders were experimenting on people decades earlier, and watched an entire facility collapse. She also keeps Billy's freedom intact. When questioned, Rebecca reports that he died in the mountains. His conviction stays on the record, but the execution never happens. It is a quiet decision from somebody who began the night insisting she could arrest him alone. By sunrise, she trusts Billy enough to lie to her own unit for him. Then, less than a day later, she walks into Resident Evil 1. 5 left the mansion. Resident Evil's first game creates a continuity headache before we even leave the building. Depending on whether you play as Chris or Jill, different people are rescued, imprisoned, or apparently left behind. No ending shows Chris, Jill, Barry, Rebecca, and Brad escaping together. Later games still establish that all 5 survived the Arklay incident, so the canon outcome is a composite. The exact road is fuzzy. The survivor list isn't. Chris Redfield survives after discovering the laboratory beneath the mansion and learning that his captain, Albert Wesker, led STRS into a controlled combat test. Jill Valentine uncovers the same conspiracy. Barry Burton makes it out after Wesker blackmails him by threatening his wife and daughters. Rebecca survives a second outbreak in roughly 24 hours, and Brad Vickers returns in the helicopter after initially fleeing the area. Later stories let us reconstruct even more. Chris and Jill both remember the mansion as direct experience. Barry's survival is necessary for his family and Revelation's 2 story. Rebecca's career continues through research and vaccine development. Brad is alive at the start of Raccoon City's collapse. The exact puzzle route matters far less than those later consequences. That last part matters. Brad gets mocked as Chicken Heart, and yeah, leaving the team on the ground is a rough look. He also keeps circling the mountains while the mansion is full of monsters, and finally responds when someone launches a signal flare. Without Brad, the ending is 5 people standing beside an angry tyrant while the whole estate prepares to explode. The helicopter rises. The mansion detonates. For a few minutes, the surviving STRS members look safe. Their lives split almost immediately. Chris pushes to investigate Umbrella and eventually leaves for Europe. Jill remains focused on exposing the company from Raccoon City. Barry moves his family to Canada because Wesker already proved they could be used against him. Rebecca appears to step away from frontline police work and develops into the biochemistry expert we later see in Vendetta and Death Island. Barry's next years are shaped by guilt. Wesker reached him through his family, so Barry gets them out of the country and becomes far more protective of his daughters. That choice eventually feeds directly into Moira's anger and the family conflict in Revelations 2. Even the mansion survivor with the most domestic-looking future carries the night into his home, and Brad stays in Raccoon City. The city's police leadership buries the ST-ARES report. Umbrella uses Chief Irons and its political influence to smother the case. These 5 people escape the mansion with proof of a corporate bioweapon program, and the official response was basically to isolate them and wait for the story to go away. It did not go away. Before we reach the city, though, there is one more Arklay survivor. The last time Chris or Jill sees him in the mansion, a tyrant has punched straight through his chest. Wesker survived his death. Albert Wesker planned to leave the mansion with Umbrella's combat data, the Tyrant, and a new position inside a rival organization. Then the Tyrant impaled him. For almost anybody else, that's the end. Wesker had prepared for it. William Birkin had supplied him with an experimental prototype virus, and Wesker injected himself before the confrontation. His body shut down, the virus took hold, and he revived with enhanced speed, strength, and durability. The mansion's self-destruct system was already running, so he still had to get out fast. He escaped the Arklay facility and emerged as something beyond an ordinary human. Calling him a survivor feels generous. He helped arrange the incident, sent his own people toward monsters, and intended to profit from the results. Still, his entire later story depends on surviving the disaster he created. Wesker moves into the shadows, collects Umbrella research, and begins treating every outbreak as a chance to acquire another virus, parasite, or useful person. The red eyes and impossible movement we associate with him come from the contingency he used that night. A failed betrayal turned into his greatest advantage. Umbrella does not celebrate his return. Wesker has betrayed the company and lost the tyrant he intended to sell. He rebuilds from the rival organization, manipulates Ada, attacks Rockfort Island, and spends years gathering the pieces needed to surpass the people who created him. Surviving Arklay gives him power. It also cuts him loose from every hierarchy he previously served. It also changed what dead means in this series. From this point onward, a body hitting the floor isn't enough. Fans want to see a corpse, an explosion, another explosion, and preferably a volcano. Wesker will eventually receive all of those. The other mansion survivors remain painfully human. One of them flies the rescue helicopter away from Arklay, spends the next 2 months living with what he saw, and dies in the streets he never managed to leave. Brad never escaped Raccoon. Brad Vickers survived Resident Evil 1, but he never escaped the larger Arklay disaster. The outbreak simply followed him home. By late September, Raccoon City is collapsing. Brad has spent weeks frightened by the mansion and convinced that Umbrella is hunting the surviving ST-ARES members. He is correct. Nemesis has been deployed specifically to eliminate them. His death changes between the original Resident Evil 3 and the remake. In the 1999 game, Brad reaches the Raccoon Police Department and warns Jill that something is hunting ST-ARES. Nemesis catches him outside the station, lifts him up and drives a tentacle through his face. Later, his zombified body can wander the police station grounds. The remake gives Brad more time with Jill. They move through the opening streets together until infected civilians overwhelm him. Brad is bitten while holding them back and eventually turns. Carlos finds the zombie Brad at the police station and puts him down. Different death scene, same ugly endpoint. The pilot who returned for everyone at the mansion stays in the city long enough to become one of its earliest named casualties. There is no later rescue, secret cure, or mystery employer. Brad survives the first game and dies during the next outbreak. The original RE2 even lets his zombie carry a special key after the player reaches the station under certain conditions, turning the previous game's rescue pilot into a hidden reward. The remake replaces that secret with a more direct encounter for Carlos. Either way, Brad's body ends up back at the building where ST-ARES once worked. And this is where the survivor list starts getting deceptive. An ending can show someone alive. It cannot promise that the next week will leave them that way. Raccoon City is about to scatter the cast across government agencies, activist groups, secret employers, and decades of unfinished infections. The first person through that machine arrives as a rookie police officer, one day late for work. Leon lost his future. Leon S. Kennedy drives into Raccoon City expecting his first shift with the police department. By sunrise, the department is gone, most of the city is infected, and his life no longer belongs entirely to him. He meets Claire Redfield near a burning tanker, gets separated from her, and spends the night protecting Sherry Birkin while chasing the truth beneath the city. He survives the police station, the sewers, and Umbrella's Nest laboratory. Then he escapes by train with Claire and Sherry shortly before the facility is destroyed. That's the hopeful ending. 3 survivors walking away together. The government quickly makes it conditional. Leon knows too much about Umbrella, and Sherry is a living G-virus case. Officials take Sherry into custody and use her safety as leverage over him. Leon accepts specialized training and enters government service. His planned life as an ordinary RPD officer lasts 0 days. From there, almost every later appearance grows out of the same bargain. In Operation Javier, he enters South America with Jack Krauser and encounters the T. Veronica virus. In Resident Evil 4, he is sent alone to recover the president's daughter from Los Illuminados. Degeneration puts him inside the Harvardville airport outbreak. Infinite darkness draws him into another government cover-up. Damnation sends him into the Eastern Slav Republic. Resident Evil 6 begins with Leon shooting President Benford after another infection reaches the White House's inner circle. Resident Evil 4 adds another detail that tends to get lost beneath all the one-liners. Leon is infected with Las Plagas alongside Ashley. Sadler can influence him. The parasite develops inside his body, and Leon has to use Luis's removal equipment before it matures. He escapes that incident free of the plaga, yet it is already the second time a bioweapon has entered his body. Degeneration exposes him to another airport attack and places him beside Claire again. Infinite darkness makes him choose national stability over immediately exposing the truth Claire found, damaging the trust between them. Damnation ends with governments treating an entire country's bioweapons as another strategic problem. Leon keeps winning the mission while the institutions around him remain largely intact. And he keeps going. Vendetta, Death Island, Requiem. There is a popular version of Leon as the cool agent who always survives and throws out a line afterward. It's earned. The man can suplex cultists and parry a chainsaw. Underneath that is somebody who entered this life because the government controlled the future of a child he had saved. He gains authority, contacts, and absurd combat experience. He also spends nearly 3 decades being sent toward whichever bioweapon crisis the United States wants, handled quietly. Every time he survives, he becomes even more useful for the next mission. By the time Requiem begins, Leon is still carrying Raccoon City in a far more literal way than he understands. We'll come back to that near the end, because it changes the answer for him and several other survivors. For now, Leon's status after 1998 is clear: alive, active, and tied to government service. Claire walks away from the same train and chooses a very different route. Claire kept searching. Claire Redfield enters Raccoon City looking for her brother. She leaves with Sherry beside her and Chris still missing. That search could have ended once she reached safety. Instead, Claire travels to Europe, investigates an Umbrella facility in Paris, and gets captured. Umbrella sends her to Rockford Island, which is almost immediately destroyed by an attack from Wesker's forces and consumed by another outbreak. Honestly, Claire may have the worst luck with islands in the whole franchise. She survives Rockfort with Steve Burnside, reaches Antarctica, and finally reunites with Chris. Steve does not leave with them. Alexia Ashford infects him with T. Veronica, and he dies after briefly regaining control long enough to protect Claire. Claire and Chris escape. The reunion she spent 2 games chasing comes with another young person dying in front of her. After that, Claire's life takes a path that fits her far better than a badge or military command. She joins TerraSave, a non-governmental organization that supports victims of bioterrorism. She's still pulled into danger constantly, but her work remains centered on civilians and the people left after outbreaks. That choice also means Claire rarely controls the force arriving after her. At Harvardville, she has to work around Will Pharma and government agents. In Infinite Darkness, she finds evidence linking soldiers and officials to experiments, only for Leon to withhold the chip that could prove the full conspiracy. They both believe they are protecting people. Their methods finally collide. In Degeneration, she survives the Harvardville airport incident and exposes Will Pharma's crimes. Infinite Darkness drags her into evidence of another government cover-up. Revelations 2 begins when armed attackers raid a TerraSave event and abduct her to Alex Wesker's island. Death Island later reunites her with Chris, Jill, Leon, and Rebecca at Alcatraz. Claire gets infected during some of these incidents and receives treatment. She is repeatedly captured, targeted, or placed beside new viruses. Yet the series never turns her into a permanent government operative. She keeps choosing the work herself. Her latest confirmed status is alive. She remains connected to TerraSave and the original survivors. We don't get a quiet home life or a final retirement scene. We get a pattern. Claire escapes, learns who has been hurt, and goes looking for the next person. Death Island shows that she can still fight beside the agents without becoming one of them. Dylan infects her and uses the survivors' history against them. Rebecca's vaccine clears the immediate strain, and Claire leaves Alcatraz alive. No permanent effect from that infection has been confirmed. That makes her one of the closest things Resident Evil has to a survivor who kept her original purpose. She came to Raccoon City for family. Decades later, she is still trying to bring people home. Sherry's future is more complicated. She receives a vaccine before leaving Nest, but her body never returns to normal. Sherry carried the G virus. William Birkin infects his own daughter with a G embryo because her genetic compatibility makes her a viable host. It is one of the nastiest family decisions in Resident Evil, which is saying a lot. Claire searches Nest for a cure, while Sherry's condition deteriorates. She obtains the vaccine, removes the embryo, and saves Sherry's life. The immediate threat is gone. The G-Virus has still altered Sherry at a cellular level. Those changes later give her extraordinary regenerative ability and slow her physical aging. Resident Evil 6 shows a deep wound healing within minutes. Sherry explains that her body has been that way since Raccoon City. The government knows exactly what she is. They also know she is a child with no surviving parent able to protect her. William mutates beyond recognition. Annette dies during the Nest collapse. That leaves Sherry inside a system controlled by the same government that authorized the destruction of Raccoon City and needed the outbreak contained politically as much as medically. After the city, Sherry is placed under state protection and studied. Derek Simmons becomes her legal guardian and controls much of her life. Leon's cooperation helps keep her safe, but safe here means living inside a system that views her biology as strategic material. Eventually, Sherry joins the Division of Security Operations herself. In 2012, she's sent to recover Jake Muller because his blood may hold antibodies against the C-Virus. So the child once held for her viral value becomes the agent assigned to another young person for his viral value. She understands him immediately. Simmons' guardianship makes the word choice messy. Sherry grows into a capable agent and appears to believe in the work. She also reaches adulthood inside the institution that monitored her, restricted her movement, and decided how much of her own medical history she could control. Her career cannot be separated cleanly from that upbringing. Sherry and Jake survive captivity, the Ustanak and the global C-Virus attacks. She returns to service. Jake heads off on his own. Her last full playable appearance leaves her alive, capable, and still connected to the government that raised her. Was she cured in 1998? The embryo was removed, and the vaccine prevented the transformation that was killing her. Her regeneration remained. By any normal medical standard, Sherry did not return to the body she had before the infection. Then Requiem goes further. Its Raccoon City Syndrome story identifies old viral exposure as something that can remain dormant for decades before becoming fatal. Sherry becomes part of that conversation again, and Elpis may finally offer the kind of antiviral answer she never received as a child. We'll hold that outcome until the end. Sherry's life is documented because institutions keep records on her. Ada Wong survives the same night by ensuring almost nobody can keep a reliable record at all. Ada fell and vanished. Ada enters Raccoon City with a cover story, which cover depends on the version. In the original Resident Evil 2, she claims to be searching for her boyfriend, Ben Bertolucci. In the remake, she presents herself as an FBI agent. Both stories get her close to Leon, the Umbrella investigation, and the G-Virus sample she was actually hired to recover. She is injured near the end of the mission and falls deep into Nest. Leon believes she is dead. She isn't. Ada survives, secures her route out, and even throws Leon the rocket launcher used against the final tyrant. Later material connects her Raccoon City mission to an unnamed organization and to Wesker, although Ada's employers and loyalties stay deliberately slippery. In Resident Evil 4, she works alongside Wesker's plan to obtain a dominant Plaga sample. She chooses not to hand the genuine sample over after learning what he intends to do. That decision delays him. It does not end the wider bioweapon trade. Ada continues accepting contracts, interfering with disasters, and occasionally saving Leon while refusing to explain herself. Resident Evil 6 makes the identity problem literal. Derek Simmons has transformed Carla Radames into Ada's physical double, then Carla builds an operation around destroying Simmons and blaming Ada. The real Ada spends the game chasing a woman who has stolen her face. She destroys Carla's laboratory, helps the other survivors from the edges of their campaigns, and takes another call before the credits are finished. Ada's latest personal destination remains unknown. She is alive after the events of RE6, and later versions of Resident Evil 4 keep her central to the Plaga sample's fate. The series gives us missions. It rarely gives us an address, a real employer, or even certainty that Ada Wong is her birth name. Who pulled her out of Nest? Different supplemental material and versions have encouraged different answers, and the games keep the mechanics vague enough to preserve the mystery. The honest answer is that Ada survived the fall and escaped. Anything beyond that needs a label attached. She gets out by keeping every relationship temporary. Hunk gets out by treating survival like a job description. Hunk walked out alone. Umbrella sends a security service team into the underground laboratory to seize the G-Virus from William Birkin. The team shoots Birkin and takes his case. Birkin injects himself, mutates, and attacks them before they can leave. Almost the entire unit dies. Hunk wakes in the sewers with the sample still somewhere inside the collapsing operation. His bonus scenario, the fourth survivor, is a straight march from the underground to the extraction point. Zombies, mutants, and everything else in the city pile into his path. He keeps moving. His extraction contact initially treats the situation like another failed team. Hunk responds with the confidence of somebody who has done this before and gives the code phrase confirming his survival. The mask stays on. His real name stays out of the report. At the end, Hunk reaches the police station's front gate and is lifted out by helicopter. The G-Virus sample leaves Raccoon City with him. His nickname, the Grim Reaper, comes from a history of returning when the people around him do not. The series hints at other successful operations and gives him a reputation larger than the single canonical escape we play. Then it keeps his identity and later life sealed. There are playable appearances in Mercenaries-style modes, alternate scenarios, and multiplayer material. Those do not establish that Hunk attended every outbreak wearing the same gas mask. His last firm story status is the thing he was always best at: mission complete, survivor extracted, personal life completely unavailable. Hunk may have the cleanest operational escape in Raccoon City. He also carries Umbrella's G-Virus out with him, allowing the research to survive the company facility that created it. Jill's escape runs the opposite way. She leaves the city only after the virus enters her body. Jill carried the T-Virus. Jill Valentine remains in Raccoon City after the mansion, investigating Umbrella while Chris leaves for Europe. Then the city collapses around her. Nemesis stalks her because she is a surviving ST-ARES member. During the escape, it infects her with the T-Virus. Jill loses consciousness, and Carlos Oliveira spends the next stretch of the game finding a vaccine while the hospital is overrun. He gets it to her in time. Jill wakes, continues fighting, and escapes Raccoon City with Carlos before the government strike wipes the city from the map. That vaccine saves her life. It also becomes a detail Wesker exploits years later. After Raccoon City, Jill works with Chris against Umbrella and helps establish the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance. In 2006, they find Oswell Spencer at his European estate. Wesker is already there. During the fight, Jill tackles him through a window and falls from the cliff with him. Before that fall, Jill helps dismantle Umbrella operations and continues functioning as one of the best field agents in the series. The vaccine does enough for her to live and work for years without visible symptoms. That is why Wesker's later discovery feels so invasive. He turns a life-saving treatment from Carlos into a source of antibodies for his own research. Chris believes she died. Wesker survives the fall and takes Jill. He places her in cryogenic confinement, repeatedly experiments on her, and discovers that traces connected to her earlier T-virus exposure give her unusual resistance. Her body becomes useful research. Then he fits the P-30 control device to her chest and forces her to operate as a masked weapon beside him. Chris and Sheva free her in Keijuju. Jill survives again, but the aftermath isn't a quick helicopter ride. Files describe medical observation and rehabilitation. Death Island finally brings her back into the field years later, visibly unchanged by age because of the experiments performed on her. During that recovery, Chris continues treating Jill as a partner who needs time, while Jill struggles with being kept away from field work. She remembers what she did under P-30. Knowing the actions were forced does not remove the memory of attacking Chris or helping Wesker move his plan forward, and that leads to a strange status. But Jill is alive. She is free of Wesker's device. She is still living inside physical consequences that began with an infection Carlos treated in 1998. And when Death Island infects the group with another engineered strain, Jill's unusual resistance becomes useful again. Rebecca produces the vaccine, and Jill helps stop Dylan Blake at Alcatraz. Dylan specifically resents famous survivors like Jill because they became heroes while ordinary people from Raccoon City were forgotten. Jill has to face that anger while knowing she never asked for the public role attached to her survival. She was targeted, infected, controlled, and then blamed for being one of the people whose name remained visible. Every organization that studies Jill sees the same thing: a woman who endured viruses that killed other people. Her survival keeps making her valuable. Carlos is the reason she lived long enough for any of that. He steps onto the rescue helicopter with her, and then vanishes from the franchise. Carlos disappeared completely. Carlos Oliveira enters Raccoon City as part of the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service. The name sounds reassuring. The unit is really a collection of mercenaries sent into a disaster Umbrella understands far better than they do. Most of them are expendable. Carlos eventually learns that. He still helps civilians, works with Jill, and enters the hospital to obtain the vaccine that saves her. In the remake, his route through the RPD also brings him face to face with the zombified Brad Vickers. By the end, Carlos has rejected Umbrella's mission completely. He and Jill escape together. Then Capcom simply stops following him. The original game's Carlos is a little more openly flirtatious and reckless. The remake gives him a stronger relationship with his squad and more time inside the hospital and police station. Both versions leave him having rejected Umbrella and chosen Jill over the mission that brought him there. Carlos has no confirmed death, no later game appearance, and no official career after Raccoon City. He might have joined another anti-bioterror group. He might have disappeared under a new identity. He might be somewhere wondering why Jill keeps reuniting with every other person. From 1998 except him, we don't know. And for this list, that matters. Last Seen Alive is a real status. It does not mean retired, safe, or dead. Carlos's story currently ends in the rescue helicopter while Raccoon City disappears behind him. The other UBCS survivor is even harder to pin down, because Resident Evil 3 gives him several possible endings and its remake creates another. Nikolai's fate split. Nikolai Genovef enters Raccoon City as a UBCS supervisor, secretly gathering combat data and eliminating anyone who threatens the value of that information. Depending on the original Resident Evil 3 route, he can die in several ways or escape in a helicopter. That branching design means the old game never offered one clean answer. The remake narrows it. Jill wounds Nikolai at the final evacuation point, chooses to save Carlos instead of dragging Nikolai aboard, and leaves him on the platform. The missile strike is minutes away. Nikolai asks whether she really has the courage to leave him there. He also hints that somebody paid him to gather combat data and destroy evidence. The remake refuses to identify that buyer, leaving his employer unresolved, even if the blast probably settles Nikolai himself. She does. Raccoon City is destroyed with Nikolai still inside the blast zone. We never see a body afterward, because there isn't much city left to search. No later game confirms an escape. Presumed dead fits. Confirmed dead goes a step beyond the evidence. Nikolai's uncertain ending is a useful warning before outbreak. Once 8 ordinary civilians enter the picture, possible escapes multiply fast, and Capcom only gives one of them a fully confirmed life beyond the city. Kevin and Mark escaped. Resident Evil Outbreak follows 8 people trying to get out of Raccoon City while the main cast handles its own disasters. The game lets different combinations complete each scenario, and its endings change according to who carries the experimental daylight vaccine. So we need one rule before going further. A playable escape proves that a character can survive that route. It does not prove all 8 people stood together in one canonical ending. Later references can confirm individual survivors. Otherwise, their exact status remains open. Kevin Raymond begins as an RPD officer drinking at Jay's bar. He has applied to STRS more than once and failed, although his shooting ability is considerably better than that rejection suggests. When the outbreak hits, his police knowledge and access help the group move through the city. In successful endings, Kevin escapes before the sterilization strike. Depending on the route, he may leave with the Daylight vaccine in his system, carry a sample, or simply make it out before infection takes him. No later mainline story checks on him. Requiem's new focus on old raccoon survivors makes that silence suddenly uncomfortable, but it still doesn't give us permission to kill him off. File 2 gives Kevin another natural lead role at the police station. In desperate times, he helps the remaining officers hold the building while Rita Phillips crawls through an old museum passage to find transport. It is the last period when the RPD resembles a defensible position. By Leon's arrival, the survivors have scattered and Marvin is dying. Mark Wilkins has a more personal ending. Mark is a Vietnam veteran, a security guard, and a family man who begins the outbreak exhausted by violence. His age and old injuries slow him down in gameplay, yet he keeps pushing because he has a wife and son somewhere outside the city. One of Mark's endings shows him returning to his family after Raccoon City. It is a simple scene, especially beside the franchise's usual laboratories and secret agencies. And that's exactly why it sticks. A civilian walks through hell and reaches the people he wanted to see again. Mark also carries the memory of an earlier war into every scenario. He begins with more health than the younger survivors and can handle firearms, yet his dialogue keeps returning to the fact that he wanted this part of his life finished. The family ending gives that fatigue somewhere concrete to land. The darker endings still apply if the player fails to deal with the infection. Outbreak allows its cast to reach the evacuation point and die anyway. Daylight, timing, and route choices matter. Kevin's escape is possible. Mark's family reunion is the clearest ordinary life offered to anyone in this entire video. Keep that in mind. We'll test it against what Requiem says about long-term raccoon survivors near the end. Jim and George escaped. The subway employee and the doctor get one shared lifeline: Daylight. Jim Chapman knows Raccoon City's underground routes and copes with danger by talking constantly. He complains, panics, jokes, and flips his lucky coin. In another game, he might be an expendable background character. Outbreak lets him be useful without turning him into a fearless action hero. George Hamilton is a surgeon at Raccoon General Hospital. He can create medicines from herbs, understands the group's symptoms, and becomes especially important once the survivors reach Raccoon University. That university holds the research behind Daylight, an experimental vaccine developed to counter the T-virus. The survivors can produce it, inject themselves, and carry a sample out. If they leave untreated while their infection meter has advanced too far, their endings change. Some die. Some become part of the outbreak they were trying to escape. Daylight has 3 possible uses during the finale. A survivor can inject it, use a dose against Thanatos, and carry another sample beyond the city. The strongest ending manages all 3. A weaker escape can save the individual while losing the research that might help anybody else. Successful routes get Jim and George out before the city is destroyed, then both disappear from the timeline. George's role gives the university trip a personal beginning. His colleague Peter Jenkins asks for help and is dead by the time George arrives. Greg Mueller tries to protect the research from Umbrella, releases Thanatos, and is killed by Nikolai. George is left finishing a vaccine project whose creators do not survive to see it leave. Did Daylight remove every trace of infection? The game treats it as the practical solution to the immediate T-virus threat. It also allows a surviving sample to reach the outside world. No later file tells us that George joined a vaccine program, or that Jim went back to the subway. Those are tempting fan conclusions because they sound tidy. Resident Evil never wrote them. Their final honest status is route-dependent survival, last seen during Raccoon City's evacuation. 2 normal people may have carried one of the most useful antivirus discoveries in the series out of the city, and nobody has mentioned them since. David and Cindy escaped. David King looks built for an outbreak. He is a plumber who can repair equipment, improvise weapons, and use tools most of the cast would walk past. He says very little and gets on with the job. Cindy Lennox is a waitress at Jay's bar. She carries extra herbs, supports the others, and begins this nightmare in the middle of an ordinary shift. Outbreak never needs to reveal that she was secretly military trained. She survives through awareness, cooperation, and a frankly heroic willingness to keep helping people who are being chased by giant animals. Their fates show the range of Outbreak's ending system. Both can escape through successful routes. They can also reach a point where infection has progressed too far. In a paired ending, David and Cindy remain together in the dying city so they cannot turn on the people outside. David's own paired ending is with Mark, while Cindy's is with George. The combinations depend on who reaches the finale untreated. That detail is exactly why fan summaries get messy. Outbreak writes intimate death scenes without declaring that any one of them happened in the shared timeline. That scene is grim, but it isn't the only outcome. Treating it as the fixed canon ending would erase the entire branching structure. Treating their successful gameplay escapes as confirmed history would go too far in the other direction. So David and Cindy sit in the unresolved group. Possible survivors, no later canonical life, no confirmed deaths. There is something very Resident Evil about two of the series' most believable civilians having less closure than the super spy who falls through a laboratory. They don't have secret employers who can bring them back whenever a plot needs them. They simply leave the screen. Yoko Suzuki is different. Her connection to Umbrella gives her a reason to hide, and it gives Umbrella a reason to make sure she forgets. Yoko lost her past. Yoko Suzuki begins Outbreak as a quiet university student with gaps in her memory. Those gaps lead directly into Umbrella's underground history. She previously worked for Umbrella. Experiments in memory manipulation damaged her recollection of that time, leaving fragments that return as the survivors move through facilities tied to the company. In Below Freezing Point, Yoko reaches an Umbrella laboratory connected to Monica, a researcher trying to smuggle the G-Virus out of the city. In Decisions, the University and Daylight research pull her even closer to information Umbrella wants buried. Yoko can escape through the same branching system as the others. She can receive Daylight, carry a sample, or die according to the route and infection level. What makes her case more suspicious is the amount of corporate knowledge locked inside her head. Then the franchise leaves her alone. There is no later report explaining whether her memories returned completely. No government program claims her. No file tells us whether she testified about Umbrella's experiments. The woman with one of the strongest links between Raccoon City's civilians and Nest-era research becomes another blank space. The supporting survivors around the Outbreak cast need a mention too. Rita Phillips reaches Harry and returns with his van during the RPD siege. The successful scenario gets them and the playable survivors away while Marvin stays behind. Linda Baldwin, an Umbrella researcher tied to Daylight, can be rescued in End of the Road and leave by helicopter or truck. Captain Rodriguez pilots the UBCS Chinook and can extract the group before the strike. Their outcomes depend on scenario choices, so Rita and Harry have the clearest completed rescue, while Linda and Rodriguez remain route-dependent. That group shows why a literal census of every person seen alive would become impossible fast. Outbreak fills its streets with named police officers, researchers, and evacuees whose survival changes with player action. The core 8 receive the continuing character endings. The key supporting escapees still count as part of the city's unresolved survivor pool. Maybe that is the safest possible outcome for Yoko. Maybe it isn't. Her status is still only possible survival. One Outbreak character finally breaks through that uncertainty. Capcom left breadcrumbs for her across more than 20 years, and Requiem turns those breadcrumbs into the last act of this video. Alyssa kept digging. Alyssa Ashcroft is an investigative reporter for the Raccoon Press. She is sharp, intrusive, and exactly the kind of person Umbrella would prefer, never entered one of its facilities. Outbreak gives her the same range of possible escape routes as the rest of the cast. For years, fans could only place her with the others. Playable survivor, outcome dependent on the ending. Then Resident Evil 7 quietly prints her name on an article. The article covers strange disappearances around Dulvey, Louisiana. It is dated long after Raccoon City, proving Alyssa survived the 1998 outbreak and continued working as a journalist. That tiny byline did more for her canon status than 2 full Outbreak games managed. The detail is easy to miss because the article exists as environmental material, not a dramatic cameo. Alyssa is never standing beside Ethan. her name survives on the work. For an Outbreak fan, that byline was enormous. One of the 8 civilians had crossed the gap into the numbered series without being turned into a soldier or a monster. Requiem makes the connection explicit. Alyssa survived Raccoon City, kept investigating bioterror-linked stories, and became the mother of Grace Ashcroft. There is a wrinkle there that the early marketing hid. Grace was adopted. Alyssa's link to her begins through Oswell Spencer's final will, a revelation we'll handle when Grace enters the story. For now, Alyssa is alive for decades after the city. She doesn't join the BSAA or become an agent. She keeps reporting. The Dulvey story shows her moving near another cover-up years before the Winters family reaches the Baker estate, and that is where I'm stopping her file for the moment. We know Alyssa eventually dies. Requiem opens around that murder, 8 years before its main 2026 events. Revealing the full reason here would throw away one of the strongest answers in the whole survivor list. Her path from Jay's Bar to the Renwood Hotel is proof that an old escape can stay active for decades. The other 7 Outbreak characters remain uncertain. Alyssa received a future because she never stopped looking into the same machinery that destroyed her city. Resident Evil Survivor gives us 3 more people who fly away from an Umbrella-controlled island. Their last image is clear. Everything afterward is empty. Sheena's 3 survivors. Ark Thompson wakes on Sheena Island with amnesia and believes he may be Vincent Goldman, the Umbrella commander responsible for the horror around him. That confusion is the game's main trick. Ark is actually a private investigator and friend of Leon Kennedy. Leon sent him to examine the island, where Umbrella was mass-producing tyrants and using kidnapped children to obtain a hormone needed in the process. 2 of those children, Lot Klein and Lily Klein, survived the island's collapse. Their parents worked for Umbrella and are killed during the outbreak. Lot initially believes the company's personnel are superior to the prisoners and workers around them because that is what he has been taught. Seeing the facility fall apart forces him to understand what Umbrella was doing. Ark recovers his identity, protects the children, and fights the Hypnos T-type tyrant. The 3 escape by helicopter while Sheena Island is destroyed below them. Hypnos attacks the helicopter during the escape and forces Ark into one last fight before the aircraft can truly leave. The tyrant evolves under damage because apparently mass-producing one already unstable bioweapon was not reckless enough. Ark defeats it and gets back aboard with the children. The children make this escape different from the usual agent extraction. Lot and Lily have lost both parents and learn that the company their family served was kidnapping other children for tyrant production. Ark is leaving with witnesses who need far more than a debrief. Their immediate rescue succeeds. Their actual upbringing after the island is a complete blank. And then, nothing. Ark presumably knows enough to report the Tyrant program, the child kidnappings, and Vincent's actions. Lot and Lily are newly orphaned witnesses to the same operation. No later game explains who receives them, where Ark takes them, or whether Leon ever hears the full story. All 3 are last seen alive. Survivor is part of the main game chronology, despite its rough reputation and second-person voice acting legend. Ark, Lot, and Lily count. Their helicopter ending feels complete until you ask where the helicopter landed. Claire Redfield at least gets an answer to the question that drove her into Raccoon City. She finds Chris. The cost of that reunion reaches from one Umbrella prison to another. Claire finally found Chris. 3 months after Raccoon City, Claire raids an Umbrella facility in Paris while searching for Chris. She is captured and sent to Rockfort Island. Then Wesker's forces attack the island, release the T-Virus, and turn Claire's prison into another outbreak. She escapes her cell, works with Steve Burnside, and eventually sends Leon a message asking him to contact Chris. Chris comes for her. The siblings' reunion takes an absurd amount of damage to achieve. Rockfort falls. Claire and Steve are transported to Antarctica. Alexia Ashford awakens with the T. Veronica virus in her body. Wesker appears in person, confirming to Chris that the captain he watched die in the mansion is alive and enhanced. Steve does not survive. Alexia infects him, his body mutates, and he briefly regains control while protecting Claire. He dies in front of her. Wesker later takes Steve's body because the T. Veronica virus inside him still has value. Chris and Claire escape Antarctica after Alexia is defeated. The ending gives them the reunion Claire wanted, and a new promise to strike at Umbrella. It also leaves a loose end with Wesker. Chris fights him and gets a direct demonstration of the speed and strength gained after Arklay. Wesker escapes with viral material taken from Steve's body. The Redfields save each other, but another valuable infection leaves the facility in an enemy's hands. Even their successful reunion feeds the next generation of research. Their careers separate afterward. Chris becomes one of the central military figures in the fight against bioterror. Claire returns to civilian aid and investigation through TerraSave. They appear together far less often than you might expect, though Death Island eventually reunites them again. Both remain alive, both keep entering outbreaks, and both now know Wesker survived Arklay. Finding Chris closes Claire's original search. It also confirms that none of the mansion survivors are finished with the people behind it. Leon has his own missing chapter before Resident Evil 4. That mission leaves one girl alive with a virus burning through her blood and turns his partner into a future enemy. Manuela burned but lived. Operation Javier takes Leon and Jack Krauser into South America to capture drug lord Javier Hidalgo. Javier has purchased T. Veronica and used it to control his disease, then used the same research on his daughter, Manuela Hidalgo. Keeping Manuela alive required organs. Javier's men kidnapped girls from nearby villages and used them as unwilling donors. Manuela discovers what her survival has cost other families and turns against him. The virus gives her blood an extreme reaction. It can ignite in open air, producing flames she learns to direct during the final confrontation. She uses that ability against Javier after he merges with a massive infected organism. Manuela survives. The United States government takes her into custody for observation and treatment. The Darkside Chronicles can present parts of Javier differently depending on performance, including how completely Manuela controls the virus and what the mission costs. The continuing point is stable. She rejects Javier, lives through the operation, and is placed under government care. Her burning blood remains the visual proof that alive and uninfected are two very different results. That is her latest confirmed status. She is another young survivor whose body contains valuable bioweapon research. Sherry's life gives us a fairly good reason to be cautious about the phrase, protective custody. The game never says Manuela was abused or turned into a weapon after the operation, so we should not invent that. It also never shows her leaving government supervision. Her T. Veronica infection was controlled enough for her to live. Whether she ever received a permanent cure, gained a normal life, or remained under observation is unknown. Leon has enough institutional experience to recognize the danger around her. Krauser sees the same event and reaches the opposite conclusion. Manuela's power frightens her because it was built from kidnapped victims. Krauser sees a form of strength the military could never give him. Krauser walks away from the same mission physically alive. What happens inside him is much easier to track. Krauser survived wrong. Jack Krauser begins Operation Javier as Leon's experienced partner. He ends it injured, angry, and convinced that ordinary human strength has failed him. The mission damages his arm. More importantly, watching Manuela weaponize T. Veronica and fighting Javier's mutations changes the way he thinks about power. Krauser already distrusts the government. After the operation, he grows bitter over being discarded and seeks out the exact kind of biological strength he once fought. He approaches Wesker and infiltrates Los Illuminados. By Resident Evil 4, he has accepted a dominant plaga and helped kidnap Ashley Graham. The original and remake present parts of his history differently. The remake leans harder into his resentment toward military command and his fixation on Leon as the student who surpassed him. Both versions reach the same place. Krauser chooses enhancement, fights Leon, and dies on the island. His role inside Los Illuminados is compromised from the start. Krauser helps the cult while planning to take its power for himself and Wesker. Sadler uses him. Wesker uses him. Krauser keeps talking about freedom through power while carrying out somebody else's infiltration mission. In the original, Ada can deliver the final blow during separate ways after Leon's fight. In the remake continuity, Leon's confrontation carries the emotional endpoint, and Ada later confirms Krauser is gone when recovering the sample from his body. Krauser survived Javier. That survival handed his grievance time to harden. His injured arm became proof in his mind that discipline and service meant nothing without overwhelming power. There is no mystery retirement here. Krauser's status after Resident Evil 4 is dead. The same era includes 2 agents who stop a far larger attack aboard an ocean liner, survive the explosion, and never appear again. Bruce and Fong vanished. Resident Evil dead. AIM introduces U.S. agent Bruce McGivern and Chinese intelligence operative Fong Ling aboard the Spencer Rain. The ship has been seized by Morpheus Duval, a former Umbrella employee carrying stolen viral material. Morpheus infects himself, mutates, and threatens to launch missiles containing the T-virus at major cities in the United States and China. Bruce and Fong begin on opposing assignments. Fong's own government eventually treats her as expendable once stopping the missile launch becomes more important than extracting its agent. Bruce refuses to leave her. They prevent the attack, move through an underwater Umbrella facility, and escape before it is destroyed. Their final scene puts them together after the mission, with the immediate crisis finished, and both governments aware of what happened. Fong's survival is especially poignant. Her handlers threaten to activate an implanted device when she stops following orders. Bruce helps her continue anyway. The pair survive Morpheus, the missiles, and their own agencies, treating the operation as more valuable than either agent. No later game brings either one back. Bruce stopped a potential mass casualty bioterror strike. Fong survived both Morpheus and an order that effectively abandoned her. They should be major names inside the series' intelligence world. Instead, they sit beside Ark and Carlos in the last seen alive pile. At least their status is firm at the moment the game ends. They escaped. What came next is completely unwritten. Ashley Graham gets a proper ride home. Then, with one tiny later reference, the series confirms she stayed part of her father's life. Ashley went home. Ashley survives Resident Evil 4 after being kidnapped by Los Illuminados and implanted with a Plaga parasite. Leon finds her in the village, and the two spend most of the game trying to stay ahead of Sadler's plan to let the parasite mature. Luis Serra helps them obtain the equipment needed to remove it. By the island, both Leon and Ashley are running out of time. They use the laser removal machine before full control takes hold. The parasites are destroyed. Ada's escape route gives Leon a jet ski, and he carries Ashley out through the collapsing tunnels. She returns to the United States. Leon also returns with the mission completed and the dominant Plaga sample gone from his hands. Ashley's rescue becomes a public success for her father, while the village, parasite, and government operation remain classified. She has to resume a public life around an event most people can never be told happened. The original game ends with Ashley jokingly asking Leon about some overtime. The remake turns that energy toward becoming his agent partner. Neither scene establishes a future career. Ashley is a traumatized college student feeling relieved beside the man who saved her. Let her have a slightly awkward line without building an entire DSO resume from it. Infinite Darkness later shows a framed photograph of Ashley in President Graham's office, confirming she returned home and remained part of his life after the rescue. Beyond that, her later fate is private. There is no confirmed lingering Plaga infection. The removal machine did its job before the parasite fully matured. Ashley appears to have one of the cleaner biological escapes on this list. We still do not see the years after rescue, and President Graham almost certainly could not explain publicly where his daughter had been. Ashley goes from the center of an international kidnapping to a person the franchise leaves alone. Honestly, good for her. One man on that island refuses to leave us even a real name. The Merchant kept trading. The Merchant appears throughout Resident Evil 4 wherever Leon needs ammunition, upgrades, or a suspiciously well-stocked shooting gallery. He operates inside Los Illuminados territory, reaches the island, and continues selling gear near the final stages of the mission. He is alive the last time Leon can visit him. That's nearly everything confirmed. The Merchant's eyes and voice suggest exposure to the Plaga. He moves through controlled territory without being attacked, appears in locations that should be impossible to reach ahead of Leon, and possesses enough weapons to equip a small army. The games never give him a name, extraction scene, or reliable explanation. The remake gives him requests, trade tokens, and a clearer network of hidden posts, yet it protects the same central mystery. He reacts to Leon's progress, knows what valuable objects are nearby, and treats the cult's island like another branch location. His practical survival skills may be stronger than anybody's in the game. Theories connect him to multiple identical traitors, the Duke, Los Illuminados, or Resistance activity. Fun theories, still theories. His shooting galleries add another bizarre layer. The Merchant has built controlled target ranges in cult territory and rewards Leon with collectible figures. He is planning for customers, not merely surviving minute to minute. Whatever his arrangement is, he expects business to continue. For survivor purposes, he is an ambiguous on-site survivor who remains active until the islands collapse. We never see whether he boards a boat, has another tunnel, or simply exists wherever somebody has enough pesetas. His last confirmed action is trading. Revelations moves us from one mysterious merchant to an entire operation where almost everybody survives and half of them are lying. Zenobia's survivors lied. Resident Evil Revelations looks like a rescue mission aboard the Queen Zenobia. It is really several overlapping deceptions built around the Terra Grigia panic and the T-Abyss virus. Jill Valentine and Parker Luciani board the ship searching for Chris Redfield and Jessica Sherwood. Chris and Jessica are somewhere else entirely. BSAA Director Clive O'Brien is running a staged operation to expose Federal Bioterrorism Commission leader Morgan Lansdale, whose decisions helped create the Terra Grigia disaster. The cast keeps surviving situations designed to look final. Parker falls into the burning depths of the Zenobia after Raymond Vester appears to die protecting him. Raymond is alive. He later rescues Parker. Jessica shoots Raymond during the mission, yet that injury is also part of the deception surrounding their real loyalties. Parker's return receives an unusually concrete follow-up. He spends time recovering and later resumes work, meaning the fall is one of the franchise's rare fake deaths with an actual rehabilitation attached. Raymond's rescue preserves the man who once protected him during Terra Grigia. Keith Lumley and Quint Sechem investigate a mountain airstrip and appear to vanish in an airstrike. They survive. Chris and Jill stop the T-Abyss virus from being launched on a global scale and expose Lansdale's role. O'Brien resigns from the BSAA after using his agents as pieces in the operation. Parker eventually recovers and returns to service. Jessica's last scene with Raymond keeps the victory from closing neatly. They possess a T-Abyss sample and are connected to interests beyond the BSAA. The game never names every layer of their allegiance. Saying they betrayed the BSAA is fair. Pretending we know the final buyer is not. Keith and Quint are the comic pair, and the airstrike is staged to make their deaths feel almost disposable. Their survival turns that scene into a pressure release. O'Brien's survival carries a different cost. He exposes Lansdale, loses his position, and leaves behind an organization whose leadership will become much murkier later. Then the ending quietly shows Raymond handing Jessica a T-Abyss sample. So here's the status board. Jill and Chris survive and remain central BSAA figures. Parker survives his fall because Raymond pulls him out. Keith and Quint survive the airstrike. O'Brien survives and leaves his position. Jessica survives. Raymond survives. And the final two are working within a hidden arrangement that the series has never properly resolved. This is why Revelations can feel confusing, even when you know the plot. Death scenes are staged, rescue missions are fabricated, and several agents are performing for multiple audiences at once. The BSAA gets the public victory and the evidence against Lansdale. It also learns how easily its own command structure can be manipulated. For Jill, the next disappearance is real. Chris sees her fall from Spencer's estate and spends years believing she died. Wesker knows exactly what happened to her. Jill became Wesker's weapon. Chris and Jill reach Oswell Spencer's estate in 2006, hunting the last major figure behind Umbrella. Wesker has already killed him. The fight goes badly. Wesker's virus-enhanced speed makes Chris and Jill look helpless, and he is about to finish Chris when Jill tackles him through a window. They fall from the cliff together. Chris searches. No body is recovered. Jill is declared dead. Wesker survives and takes her with him. For the next several years, he keeps Jill in cryogenic confinement and uses her in experiments connected to Ouroboros. Her old T-virus exposure and the treatment she received in Raccoon City have left antibodies inside her body. Wesker harvests that biological advantage and eventually places the P-30 device on her chest, keeping the drug flowing into her system and suppressing her control over her own actions. By the time Chris and Sheva meet the masked operative in Kijuju, Jill is fighting beside the man she tried to kill. Wesker has changed her appearance, used her body for research, and turned one of the BSAA's founders into a weapon against its other founder. Chris recognizes her. He and Sheva tear the control device away while Jill struggles against the orders driving her to protect it. The machine comes off. Jill survives. She is too weak to join the final pursuit, so Josh Stone stays with her during desperate escape. They fight their way to the helicopter and return in time to help extract Chris and Sheva from the volcano. Afterward, Jill spends years in medical care. Death Island explains that the experiments slowed her aging and left her frustrated by the time taken from her. She looks much as she did before Kijuju, while everyone around her has visibly aged. This one always bothers me more than the series tends to admit. Jill loses years off screen, Chris gets her back, and she returns to active duty eventually, but nobody can hand those years back. Her current status is alive and active after Death Island. Wesker's control is gone. The physical aftermath is still part of her. Shiva and Josh stayed. Sheva Alomar survives Kijuju beside Chris Redfield. She begins the mission as his assigned BSAA partner and ends it firing a rocket into Albert Wesker. Her history with Umbrella gives the operation personal weight. A viral incident destroyed the factory where her parents worked, and the company tried to erase the witnesses. Sheva was taken out of the region by anti-Umbrella operatives. Years later, she returns as part of the BSAA's West Africa branch. She and Chris survive the Ouroboros outbreak, the aircraft crash, and the volcano. Josh Stone survives as well. He rescues Jill, helps secure the helicopter, and pulls the others away after Wesker's death. Both are alive at the end of Resident Evil 5. Sheva chooses to stay beside Chris after Jill tells him to continue the pursuit. At several points, she could reasonably hand the global problem back to the veteran and protect her own branch. She goes into the aircraft and volcano anyway. Josh spends the same finale refusing to abandon Jill, even while Majini and time pressure close around them, and both stay in Africa as far as the story tells us. Sheva keeps contact with Chris in supplemental material, but she has never received another full game role. Josh disappears with the rest of the branch. Their status is much firmer than Carlos's. Alive after Kijuju, still connected to the BSAA at that point, later whereabouts unconfirmed. It is strange how thoroughly the franchise moves away from them. Chris keeps finding new teams. Jill returns. The BSAA itself becomes increasingly suspect. The two agents who helped end Wesker's plan never get to comment on what their organization turns into. They leave the final battlefield in a helicopter, with Chris and Jill beside them. For once, everybody aboard survives the ending. The man in the volcano does not. Wesker finally died. Albert Wesker survives Arklay, Rockford Island, Antarctica, the Spencer Estate, and an aircraft crash into a volcano. Resident Evil 5 finally runs out of places for him to leave from. After infecting himself with Ouroboros, Wesker fights Chris and Sheva inside the crater. The virus reacts violently with his body, wrapping him in black tendrils while he tries to drag the entire world into his idea of forced evolution. Getting him there takes preparation. Jill explains that Wesker needs regular doses of a stabilizing drug. Chris and Sheva force an overdose into him aboard the aircraft, disrupting the balance of the prototype virus in his body. Wesker loses control of the plane, crashes into the volcano, and reaches for Ouroboros as his last source of power. So the final death is not a lucky pair of rockets landing on an invincible man. Jill's knowledge weakens him. Chris and Sheva push him into instability. The volcano finishes a chain of choices made by several survivors he previously used. Chris and Sheva reach the helicopter. Wesker is still alive enough to grab it with a tentacle. Then they fire 2 rocket-propelled grenades into him at the same time. The impact takes his head and destroys the body inside the lava. That is Albert Wesker's confirmed death. Later games can use his bloodline, his research, clones, people named Wesker, and characters imitating his look. Dead by Daylight can put him wherever it likes. The main Resident Evil timeline has never shown the original Albert climbing out of that volcano. His survival streak lasts 11 years, in-universe, and several generations of games. It ends with Chris and Sheva watching the crater erupt behind them. Of course, the Wesker project created more than Albert. Alex Wesker builds a survival plan that does not require her original body to leave the island at all. Moira refused her ending. Revelations 2 has a bad ending and a good ending, and Moira Burton's fate is the hinge between them. Moira is abducted with Claire and taken to Alex Wesker's island. A bracelet monitors her fear because Alex's experiments depend on subjects reaching a particular psychological state. Moira refuses to use firearms after a childhood accident in which she shot her younger sister, Polly. That fear shapes her entire side of the campaign. During the escape, Claire becomes trapped beneath collapsing debris. Moira has a gun within reach. If the player never helped her confront that trauma earlier, she cannot take it. Claire is rescued by someone else. Barry later reaches the island, and Alex's plan succeeds in its ugliest form. In the continuing good route, Moira grabs the weapon, saves Claire, and is caught in the collapse herself. Everyone assumes she died. The route difference begins earlier, during the fight with Neil Fisher. If Moira is the one who takes the gun and finishes him, she breaks through the fear attached to the childhood shooting. That mechanical choice is why her later action under the rubble works. The game makes her survival depend on character development the player has to participate in. She didn't. An old Russian survivor named Evgeny Rebich finds her and keeps her alive on the island for 6 months. Their relationship is rough, funny, and unexpectedly warm. After Evgeny dies, Moira leaves the shelter, reaches Barry during the final battle, and shoots Alex at the moment her family needs her. Moira reunites with Barry and Claire. Later epilogue material shows her back with the Burton family. That route has the clearest continuation support, so Moira's status is alive. The specific choice still matters. Revelations 2 lets her survive because the player helps her face the exact memory that had frozen her for years. Barry gets his daughter back. He also brings another child home. That child may be carrying Alex Wesker. Natalia carried Alex. Natalia Corda survived the Terra Grigia panic as a child. The trauma blunted her fear response, which makes her the perfect candidate for Alex Wesker's experiment. Alex has spent years searching for a way to escape death. Her plan is to copy her consciousness into a compatible host. She selects Natalia, subjects the island's prisoners to fear-inducing trials, and prepares the transfer. Then Alex learns she is terminally ill and tries to shoot herself before the process is complete. She survives the attempt in a mutated form. Meanwhile, Natalia spends 6 months on the island with the copied consciousness dormant inside her. Barry arrives searching for Moira and takes responsibility for protecting Natalia without understanding the full situation. During the final battle, the original Alex tries to kill the child. She cannot tolerate the idea that the copied version inside Natalia could continue while her own body dies. Barry, Claire, and Moira defeat her. Alex's plan depends on fear, because extreme terror can interfere with the transfer. Natalia's unusual calm makes her ideal. The bracelets on the other captives shift color as their fear rises, giving Alex a visual measure of who can carry her consciousness and who will mutate or die. That helps explain why the final scene stays ambiguous. Natalia was selected precisely because the process had a chance to work. Alex's original death removes one version of her. It does nothing to erase the information already placed in the child. Natalia leaves with them. The ending looks safe until the epilogue. At the Burton home, Natalia reads Franz Kafka and recites a line associated with Alex. Her posture and tone shift just enough to make the implication obvious. Alex's personality is waking up. That scene does not confirm Natalia has been completely replaced. She may contain both identities. Alex may emerge gradually. Natalia may resist. Capcom has left the question untouched for years, and that uncertainty is the entire point of her status. Natalia survived the island physically. Alex's original mutated body died. A copy of Alex's mind appears to survive inside the girl Barry adopts. The franchise has brought villains back through viruses before. This version is quieter. No red eyes, no dramatic resurrection, just a child reading at a table in the home of one of the original STARS survivors. Barry took her home. The Burton family ending is almost suspiciously calm. Barry finds Moira alive. Claire returns to help in the final battle. Natalia is rescued from Alex. They all leave the island, and Barry adopts Natalia into his family. The epilogue gives them a stretch of actual domestic time. Claire and Moira exchange letters. Polly is safe. Barry is present instead of being pulled away by another operation. Resident Evil rarely lets a rescue settle into ordinary rooms, which makes Natalia's changed reading voice hit harder. For Barry, this closes a wound that began long before the kidnapping. He spent years blaming himself for Moira's gun trauma and struggling with their relationship. Revelations 2 forces him to follow his daughter into a disaster, then trust that she is capable of saving herself and him. Moira later writes to Claire and appears to be rebuilding her life. Barry is alive with his wife, daughters, and adopted child. It is one of the rare Resident Evil endings interested in what family looks like after the extraction. Then Natalia quotes Kafka with Alex's voice sitting somewhere behind the words. The Burtons do not know what the audience knows. No later game has shown Alex taking control, and no file has cleared Natalia. Their home remains the last confirmed location for the series' most unsettling, unresolved consciousness transfer. Barry's earlier decision to move his family away from Umbrella protected them for years. Revelations 2 brings the threat inside anyway, wearing the face of a child he wants to save. That does not make adopting Natalia a mistake. Leaving her on the island would have been monstrous. It makes the unresolved ending personal. Barry's status is alive. Moira's is alive. Natalia's is alive, with Alex's copied mind implied to be emerging. Alex's original body is dead. That is as precise as the game allows. Resident Evil 6 goes in the opposite direction from this quiet epilogue. It throws several returning survivors into one global attack and gives each of them a different reason to keep moving. Leon and Helena survived. Leon begins Resident Evil 6 by shooting the infected president, Adam Benford. Benford had planned to reveal the truth about Raccoon City. The outbreak in Tall Oaks silences him before he can. Helena Harper knows more than she admits. Derek Simmons forced her to assist the attack by holding her sister Deborah hostage. Leon follows Helena into the cathedral, learns the truth, and finds Deborah already transformed. Helena has to watch her sister die while the man responsible keeps the entire government pointed at them. They survive Tall Oaks, reach Lansheng, and expose Simmons. Ada helps from the shadows. Simmons mutates repeatedly, gets hit by a train, returns, becomes something resembling a giant animal, and still needs to be finished with a lightning rod and an explosive shot. Leon and Helena live. Their route also places them inside another deliberate cover-up. Tall Oaks is bombed to contain the outbreak, repeating the logic used on Raccoon City while Leon is still inside the target zone. He escapes another city erased by its own government, this time carrying evidence that the attack began among senior officials. Helena expects punishment for her role. Leon insists that the evidence and coercion matter, and she is ultimately exonerated. Her story ends with Deborah's grave and a suggestion that she will continue serving. Then she disappears from canon. Leon continues through Vendetta, Death Island, and Requiem. Helena has no later confirmed appearance. She joins Carlos Sheva and several others as a capable partner the franchise uses for one major operation and leaves behind. The contrast is sharp. Leon's survival guarantees more assignments. Helena's survival gives her an unknown future. Across Lansheng, Chris Redfield also reaches the end of the outbreak alive. His partner makes sure of it. Chris lost Piers. Chris's Resident Evil 6 campaign begins after most of his BSAA unit has been killed in Edonia. Carla Radames manipulates the team into a trap, and Chris survives with severe trauma and memory loss. Piers Navans finds him months later drinking in a bar. He pulls Chris back into the BSA because the unit needs its captain, and because Piers still believes in the man Chris was before Edonia. That faith carries them through Lanxiang and into an underwater facility where House is preparing to emerge. During the fight, Piers loses an arm and suffers fatal injuries. He injects himself with the C-Virus, gaining the electrical mutation needed to protect Chris and destroy Chaos. There is no cure waiting for Piers. He places Chris inside the escape pod, refuses to enter, and launches him to the surface alone. The facility explodes with Piers still inside. Chris survives because Piers makes the decision for him. Piers had been positioned as Chris's possible successor. He is younger, disciplined, and capable of leading the unit when Chris steps away. His infection destroys that future in minutes. The C-Virus power lets him beat Hyos and guarantees he cannot leave the facility as the man who entered it. At the beginning of the campaign, Chris wants revenge and is willing to burn through the people around him to get it. By the end, he is forced to live with the partner who restored his purpose, choosing death in his place. Chris stays in the BSAA. Years later, his distrust of its leadership pushes him to form the Hound Wolf Squad and operate outside the organization's normal command. That shift starts making more sense when you count the teams he has watched die. The final restaurant scene shows Chris returning to duty. A steak waits across from the empty seat Piers should have occupied. It is wonderfully specific and miserable. Chris honors the sacrifice by taking the command Piers wanted him to keep. Piers is confirmed dead. Chris is alive, active, and still surrounded by people he feels responsible for bringing home. Sherry's RE6 mission places her beside somebody with an even more famous biological inheritance. Sherry found Jake. Jake Muller is Albert Wesker's son. He grows up without his father and works as a mercenary, unaware that his blood carries antibodies valuable to a world facing the C-Virus. Sherry is sent to retrieve him from Edonia. They are captured, tested, and pursued by the Ustanak across months and continents. The creature keeps returning with new weapons, while Jake and Sherry gradually realize how similar their situations are. Both inherited something institutions want. Sherry carries regenerative changes from the G-Virus. Jake carries Wesker's biology and antibodies that can support a vaccine. Neither chose it. Both have spent parts of their lives being watched, confined, or priced according to their blood. They escape the underwater facility and help stop the global attack. Jake initially demands an enormous payment for his antibodies, then reduces it to $50 after everything he has seen. His final scene shows him working independently and protecting civilians from bioweapons. Jake also learns who his father was. The name Albert Wesker means global catastrophe to almost everyone around him. Jake refuses to let that bloodline decide his loyalties. His antibodies help produce a vaccine, and his last playable choice points him toward protecting people. Wesker's search for superiority ends with Wesker. Sherry's response is quieter. She knows exactly how it feels to have a parent become a monster and leave an infection behind. Their bond works because neither needs the other person's biology explained as a novelty. Sherry returns to the DSO. Their relationship does not receive a later playable continuation. Jake remains alive after RE6, with no confirmed fate beyond his independent work. Sherry remains alive and in government service until Requiem brings her old infection back into focus. They survive because their mutations made them difficult to kill and too valuable to discard. Freedom is harder to measure. Ada's campaign ends the same crisis by erasing the laboratory that manufactured another woman in her image. Ada erased her double. Carla Radams was a researcher working for Derek Simmons. Simmons became obsessed with Ada Wong and used the C-virus to transform Carla into a physical copy of her. Carla eventually learns what was done to her and turns the Neo Umbrella operation against Simmons. She uses Ada's face, Ada's identity, and a global outbreak as weapons in a very personal revenge plan. By the time Ada finds the truth, Carla has spent years living inside somebody else's appearance. Simmons calls the project successful because the body resembles Ada. Carla's own identity is treated as disposable. Her revenge kills huge numbers of people who had nothing to do with the experiment, but the rage at the center of it is easy to understand. The real Ada spends Resident Evil 6 cleaning up that stolen identity. She discovers Carla's history, destroys the laboratory containing the research, and helps Leon, Helena, Sherry, and Jake without staying for their reunions. Carla dies after mutating aboard an aircraft carrier. Ada survives. At the end, she accepts another assignment before the last one has emotionally settled. That is the closest thing Ada has to a normal routine. No home, no confirmed real name, no retirement. Her fate remains deliberately operational, alive, mobile, and working for interests the games refuse to define completely. By this point, the series has accumulated a huge list of survivors who could return at any moment. It also has a habit of treating absence as an ending. So before the mold changes the definition of life completely, let's count the people Resident Evil simply stopped checking on. The missing never returned. Billy Cohen walks into the Arklay fog with a legally dead identity. Rita Phillips and Harry drive away from the RPD in Outbreak File 2. Linda Baldwin and Captain Rodriguez can escape through end-of-the-road routes. Their later lives are as undocumented as the playable civilians they help. Carlos Oliveira leaves Raccoon City with Jill. Kevin, Mark, Jim, George, David, Cindy, and Yoko have survival routes in Outbreak, while Alyssa alone receives strong later confirmation. Ark Thompson leaves Sheena Island with Lot and Lily Klein. Manuela enters U.S. custody after Operation Javier. Bruce McGivern and Fong Ling escape the Spencer Rain incident. Ashley returns home. Sheva Alomar and Josh Stone leave Kajuju alive. Helena Harper is exonerated. Jake Muller continues working independently. None of those absences equals death. Their confidence levels differ. Ashley, Sheva, Josh, Helena, and Jake have firm, successful endings. The Outbreak 7 depend on branching routes. Billy is last seen alive with an official death recorded. Manuela is alive in custody when her story ends. Carlos flies away and never calls. Fans naturally fill those gaps. Carlos joined a resistance. Billy met Rebecca again. Hunk retired. The merchant opened a shop beside the Duke. Some theories are great. They stay outside this script unless a game supports them. The missing characters can look like the safest survivors because Capcom has not placed them near another outbreak. That safety is invisible. We do not know whether they built families, kept fighting, or died years later from something completely ordinary. And now Resident Evil introduces Ethan Winters, a man who appears ordinary for an entire game. Village eventually reveals that Ethan did not survive the opening hour in the way any of us thought. Ethan died first. Ethan Winters drives to Dulvey in 2017 after receiving a message from his missing wife, Mia. She has been gone for 3 years. The message leads him to an abandoned guest house on the Baker property, where he finds Mia imprisoned underground. Their reunion lasts a few minutes before the mold's control takes over. Mia attacks Ethan, stabs him, and cuts off his hand with a chainsaw. He manages to stop her. Then Jack Baker appears behind him, welcomes him to the family, and stamps his boot down on Ethan's head. Village later makes the timing explicit. Ethan dies there. The thing that gets up at the dinner table carries Ethan's memories, personality, and absolute refusal to leave without Maya. The mold has reconstructed his body so convincingly that he never realizes the original human body is gone. Resident Evil 7 shows us the evidence constantly and encourages us to accept it as game logic. Zoe staples his severed hand back on, and it works. Ethan pours first aid medicine over wounds that should require surgery. Jack can cut off his leg and offer him a bottle, after which Ethan reattaches it and stands up. The punishment he survives goes far beyond a lucky civilian with a strong pain tolerance. At the time, most players treated those moments as the exaggerated healing rules of first-person Resident Evil. Village turns them into story clues. Eveline explains that the mold replaced Ethan's body after Jack killed him. The Megamycete stores consciousness and can reproduce people from that information. Ethan is a molded human who believes, feels, and chooses as Ethan Winters. The series leaves the exact instant of reconstruction hazy. Ethan blacks out after Jack's attack and wakes at the family dinner. We do not see a second body being printed in a laboratory. The mold is already throughout the property, and Jack's attack gives it a dead host to rebuild. By the time Zoe staples the hand back on, the process has happened. That also explains why Ethan can be infected without showing the standard loss of self. Eveline wants him inside her family. The reconstructed body and his unusual resistance let his personality persist while the mold repairs him over and over. That last part is important. The reveal does not suddenly make every choice fake. Ethan loves Mia, searches for Rose, and experiences pain. His copied body preserves the person well enough that even trained medical teams fail to tell him what happened, or choose not to tell him. He survives the Baker estate, defeats Eveline, and leaves by helicopter with Mia in the canonical ending. From his point of view, he is a human survivor with some excellent first aid fluid. From the series' biological point of view, Ethan's death occurred near the start of Resident Evil 7. Everything after it is the continued life of a consciousness carried by mold. That creates one of the hardest survivor questions in the franchise. If a body dies and an organism rebuilds it with the same mind, did the person survive? Resident Evil answers emotionally. Ethan remains Ethan. Physically, his clean escape ended before he ever met the Baker family at dinner. He leaves Dulvey beside Mia, whose relationship with the mold began before the ship ever reached Louisiana. MIA brought mold home. Mia Winters' first secret is that she was never an ordinary babysitter traveling for work. She worked for the Connections, the criminal organization responsible for Eveline. Mia served as Eveline's handler during transport aboard the tanker Annabelle. Eveline was presented as a child because she had been engineered to infiltrate targets by creating a controllable family around herself. The mission failed. Eveline escaped containment during a hurricane, spread the mold through the ship, and caused the wreck that eventually reached the Louisiana coast. Jack Baker found Mia and Eveline and brought them home. That act of kindness infected the entire family. Mia spends the next 3 years under Eveline's control, cycling between periods of awareness and violence. She records messages telling Ethan to stay away. Eveline uses her anyway, sending the email that draws him to the property. During Resident Evil 7, Mia can resist the control long enough to help Ethan. In the canonical choice, he uses the serum on her. The two survive Eveline and leave with the team operating under the Blue Umbrella name. Their future looks almost domestic. Chris relocates them to Europe. They have Rose. Ethan studies military material because he never wants to be helpless again. Mia still knows more than Ethan. She understands his body is molded, and arguments in Village suggest she has withheld major pieces of the truth. Their family remains under medical supervision. Tests, security, and relocation surround them, even when Ethan believes the nightmare is over. Then Miranda abducts Mia, takes her place, and spends days inside the Winters' home. Chris raids the house, shoots the woman Ethan thinks is his wife, and removes Rose. The plan goes wrong on the road to the village, pulling the entire family into another outbreak. The real Mia survives captivity in Miranda's laboratory. Chris finds her and brings her to the extraction helicopter. Her latest confirmed status after Village is alive. How completely was Mia cured in Louisiana? The serum broke Eveline's immediate control, and later treatment allowed her to live normally enough to have Rose. The games do not give us a clean lab result, declaring every trace of mold gone. Rose's existence alone tells us both parents' unusual biology mattered. Mia survives the ship, the Baker estate, and Miranda. She also carries responsibility for helping transport the bioweapon that caused the first disaster. Ethan learns far too little of that history while he is alive. Zoe Baker tells him more truth from a trailer on the property. She makes the serum and guides him through the house. When the one usable dose remains, the canonical ending leaves her behind. Zoe was left behind. Zoe Baker avoids full control longer than the rest of her family. She stays hidden in a trailer, studies Eveline's infection, and speaks to Ethan over the phone while he stumbles through the estate. Without Zoe, Ethan probably never leaves the main house. She explains the strange doors, points him toward the serum ingredients, and identifies the need for D-series material. When Ethan finally reaches the boathouse, he has 2 serum doses. One is used during the fight with Jack. One remains. The player can choose Mia or Zoe. Choosing Mia leads into the continuing story used by Village. Choosing Zoe creates an alternate ending where Mia attacks the boat and Ethan later leaves alone. That branch is playable, but the later games settle which route continues. Ethan gives the serum to Mia. Zoe stands on the dock and watches them leave. There is no spare serum hidden in Ethan's pocket. The game makes the choice hurt, because the resources really are exhausted at that moment. Zoe understands the estate better than anybody, and still cannot manufacture another dose before Eveline reaches her. Eveline then appears and calcifies her body, turning her into a pale, crumbling figure in the swamp. The base game offers no rescue. After hours of guiding Ethan and producing the cure, Zoe's reward is being abandoned inside the quarantine zone. The choice makes sense from Ethan's position. Mia is his wife, and the entire reason he came. It still feels awful. Zoe has risked herself for him, while Mia has spent much of the night trying to put tools through his body. Not a Hero later confirms Blue Umbrella and government forces remain around the Baker property. Zoe is still missing inside it. Her fate is resolved in End of Zoe, when a man who looks at molded creatures and decides to punch them enters the swamp. For players who only finish the base game, Zoe's calcified body can look like a confirmed death. End of Zoe is why she belongs on the survivor list. The add-on continues the canon route, instead of reviving the alternate Zoe choice. Joe Baker found her. Joe Baker is Jack's older brother. He lives away from the main house, distrusts outsiders, and somehow develops a fighting style based around hitting biological weapons with his bare hands. When Joe finds an apparently dead woman near the swamp, he discovers she is Zoe. She is calcified and barely alive. A Blue Umbrella soldier tells him a cure exists, which sends Joe through the contaminated zone while a mutated Jack stalks them. Yes, Jack is still moving at this point. Joe obtains an incomplete dose, carries Zoe deeper into the estate, and eventually finds the full cure. He defeats the final version of his brother using a powered gauntlet and injects Zoe. The gauntlet comes from the soldiers Joe distrusted, and he only accepts their help once Zoe's condition leaves no alternative. His rescue arc is basically one long argument with modern bioterror procedure. He trusts his fists, learns enough to use the equipment, and never becomes comfortable with the people controlling the quarantine. She wakes, Blue Umbrella forces arrive, and Chris Redfield confirms to Zoe that they received Ethan's information and came looking for her. She is evacuated and speaks to Ethan by phone afterward. He kept his promise to send help, even if Joe did most of the actual rescuing. Zoe and Joe are both alive after End of Zoe. Zoe receives treatment. Joe survives an experience that should probably qualify him for immediate recruitment, although later games never mention him again. This is one of the cleaner emotional resolutions in Resident Evil. The helper left behind by the main ending is found by family and physically carried out. Whether Zoe's cure removed every long-term mold consequence is never tested on screen. Her last confirmed condition is conscious, human in appearance, and under professional care. Chris leaves Louisiana after a very different side operation. The organization beside him wears Umbrella's name, and he does not trust it for a second. Chris built Hound Wolf. The blue umbrella branding at the end of Resident Evil 7 confused everybody for good reason. A reorganized company is using Umbrella's name and resources to clean up bioterror sites under outside supervision. Chris works beside it while openly questioning its motives. And not a hero, he enters the Baker mine to capture Lucas. Lucas has been working with the Connections and has avoided Eveline's control. Chris survives Lucas's traps, kills him after his mutation, and prevents his data from leaving the facility. The distrust does not fade. By village, Chris commands the Hound Wolf squad. Canine, Lobo, Night Howl, Tundra, and Umber Eyes. The members are personally loyal to him and operate inside the BSAA while increasingly ignoring its chain of command. They investigate Miranda, monitor the Winters family, and raid the house after Miranda replaces Mia. Chris makes a catastrophic communication decision by refusing to tell Ethan what is happening. The transport is attacked. Rose is taken. Ethan wakes alone near the village. Chris later admits he should have told Ethan the plan. It is one of the few times the series lets a veteran's secrecy create the next survival problem in such a direct way. Hound Wolf follows the order flawlessly. The failure comes from Chris assuming information would make Ethan harder to protect. Hound Wolf survives the operation. The squad infiltrates Miranda's stronghold, plants explosives around the Megamai seat, and supports the evacuation. Individual post-mission lives are not documented, so grouping them is more honest than inventing 5 separate biographies. During the extraction, Chris learns the BSAA has sent humanoid bioweapons into the village as soldiers. The organization he helped build is now deploying the kind of asset it was created to stop. He orders the squad toward BSAA headquarters. Chris's latest direct game status is alive, angry and operating with a unit whose loyalty sits with him above the institution. Umber Eyes later appears in Requiem's extended ending as part of the rescue sent on Chris's behalf, confirming the Hound Wolf connection remains active. Chris has survived long enough to watch Umbrella fall and the BSAA repeat part of its logic. He reaches Ethan during Village, but too late to save his body. Ethan died again. Ethan spends Village searching for Rose while his molded body deteriorates under damage that would have killed him repeatedly. Lady Dimitrescu slices through his hand. He reattaches it with first aid medicine and carries on. He is bitten, impaled, thrown through floors and exposed to the Megamai seat's entire ecosystem. Every impossible recovery is another clue. Then Miranda tears out his heart. Ethan falls into darkness and speaks with Eveline, inside the mold's shared consciousness. She tells him Jack killed him 3 years earlier. His body has been mold ever since. Ethan rejects the idea long enough to stand up again. The Duke finds him, loads him into the carriage, and drives him back toward Miranda. Ethan defeats her and recovers Rose, but the damage has finally reached a point his body cannot repair. His hand begins to calcify. Pieces of him break away. Chris tries to carry him out. Ethan knows there is no time. He gives Rose to Chris, takes the detonator, and walks back toward the Megamai seat. Miranda's mold structure closes around the village. Ethan triggers the explosives at its center. His physical body is destroyed in the blast. The explosion also destroys the visible Megamai seat root, though fragments and stored consciousness remain available for later research. That distinction is why Shadows of Rose can happen without undoing Ethan's sacrifice. The village organism is defeated. Its recorded minds are not erased instantly. That appears to be Ethan's final death until Shadows of Rose reveals his consciousness still exists inside the Megamai seat's stored network. 16 years later, he can recognize Rose, guide her, and take form inside that mental space. The organism preserved him after the body ended. So Ethan has 3 different survival states across 2 games. Human Ethan dies at the Baker estate. Mold reconstructed Ethan survives Dulvey and lives for several years. That body dies in Village. His consciousness remains stored afterward, and the consciousness can still act. Inside the network, Ethan shields Rose from Miranda and gives her power when she is close to being overwhelmed. He is more than a passive recording playing old lines. How long that form can persist after Rose leaves is unknown. Calling him alive in the ordinary sense becomes difficult. Calling him gone ignores what Rose directly encounters. The emotional ending stays simple. Ethan chooses his daughter, again. Mia and Rose leave by helicopter while the village disappears behind them. One is a treated mold survivor. The other was dismembered as a baby and rebuilt by the Megamai seat before she could form a memory. MIA and Rose escaped. Miranda kidnaps Rose because the child carries an extraordinary connection to the mold. She divides the baby into 4 crystal flasks and distributes them among the village lords. Ethan spends most of the game collecting those flasks without knowing whether Rose can be restored. The ritual recombines her. Miranda plans to use Rose as a vessel for her dead daughter Eva. Rose survives the process and is still herself when Ethan defeats Miranda. Chris carries her to the helicopter. Mia is already aboard after being rescued from Miranda's laboratory. Ethan hands Rose over, refuses to come with them, and walks back with the detonator. Mia realizes what he is doing before Chris says it. The helicopter escapes. Ethan's explosion destroys the Megamycete and the village site. Afterward, Chris appears to keep a close role in Rose's life. Mia remains alive, though Shadows of Rose places teenage Rose apart from her and does not fully explain the family's day-to-day arrangement. Files suggest strain and separation. They do not give us enough to invent a dramatic off-screen split. Rose grows up under government observation. Other children mock her. Agents monitor her abilities and treat her as both a person and a potential weapon. By 16, she wants the powers gone badly enough to enter the remaining Megamycete consciousness for a supposed cure. The opening and closing cemetery scene even shows how tightly she is watched. A government vehicle collects her from Ethan's grave, and the agent has enough confidence to tease her about the nickname Eveline used. Rose's response makes clear that the agency knows only part of what she can do. Mia's latest confirmed status is alive. Rose's is alive and biologically unique. Their helicopter ending rescues them from Miranda. It does not rescue Rose from being the daughter of 2 mold-altered parents, or from the institutions that know what she can do. Rose eventually reaches the exact thing many survivors on this list wanted: a chance to remove the infection-derived part of herself. She breaks it. Rose kept her powers. Shadows of Rose takes place 16 years after Village, inside the stored consciousness of the Megamycete. Rose enters looking for the purifying crystal, which is supposed to remove her abilities. Inside, she encounters copies of familiar places, a hostile version of the Duke, and endless versions of herself being destroyed by the environment. Eveline resents Rose as the child who received the life and power she wanted. Miranda is still searching for a vessel for Eva. A guiding presence called Michael helps Rose move through the memories. He pushes objects into her path, leaves messages, and protects her when the world turns against her. Michael is Ethan. The network preserved his consciousness after Village. Rose eventually sees his face, hears him speak, and understands that her father has been guiding her. Miranda captures Rose and attempts the vessel ritual again. Ethan gives everything he has left inside the network to protect her. Rose reaches the purifying crystal. Then she destroys it. She chooses to keep the abilities she spent years hating, uses them against Miranda, and accepts that the part of herself other people feared also connects her to Ethan. She escapes the Megamycete consciousness with her identity intact. That choice does not turn Rose into a cheerful superhero. She still carries anger, isolation, and a complicated relationship with the people monitoring her. What changes is ownership. Miranda, Eveline, and the government have all tried to define Rose through her biology. She decides what the biology means to her. The epilogue shows Rose visiting Ethan's grave before being collected for a mission. An agent jokes about her power. She shuts him down by invoking abilities Chris does not even know she has. Rose remains under supervision, but she is far from powerless inside that relationship. Her latest confirmed status is alive in 2037, active and in control of at least part of the mold-based abilities she inherited. She may be Resident Evil's first survivor to reject the idea that a return to biological normality is the only good ending. Sherry adapts to regeneration. Jill lives with slowed aging. Rose makes the decision herself and keeps the power. There is one complication people regularly confuse. The masked Duke inside the Megamycete is a constructed figure shaped by Miranda. It does not confirm the real Duke became evil or died. The real one was last seen driving Ethan toward Miranda while the village prepared to explode. The Duke drove away. The Duke survives every lord in Resident Evil Village. He trades inside Dimitrescu Castle, appears near Heisenberg's factory, and knows far more about the region than he explains. After Miranda removes Ethan's heart, the Duke finds the body and somehow recognizes that Ethan can still continue. He places him in the carriage and drives him back to the ceremony site. Ethan asks what the Duke is. The Duke says he cannot quite answer that himself. That is the closest we get to an origin. He drops Ethan near the final battle and is not shown during the Megamycete explosion. No body appears, no later file confirms an escape. He is last seen alive, mobile, and in possession of a carriage. The timing gives him a plausible road out. He leaves Ethan before the ceremony, and the final detonation does not happen immediately. Plausible is the limit. The game never cuts to the Duke watching the blast from a safe road, and his shop does not appear in the physical world afterward. The giant hostile merchant Rose, encountered 16 years later, exists inside stored mold consciousness. Treating that figure as the real Duke would turn a psychological construct into a physical fate. So the Duke joins the merchant and Resident Evil's tiny club of traitors, who can enter impossible places and leave before the ending explains them. The next canon story pulls 5 famous survivors onto one island. It gives us the clearest status update the original cast had received in years, right before Requiem reopens the Raccoon City case. 5 heroes reunited. Death Island brings Chris, Jill, Leon, Claire, and Rebecca into the same story at Alcatraz. That alone is a massive status update. Chris and Jill are still operating with the BSAA. Leon remains a government agent. Claire still works through TerraSave. Rebecca is now a leading scientist whose ability to create vaccines matters as much as anybody's gun. Dylan Blake targets them because he hates the system surrounding bioterror survivors. He watched his own unit collapse during Raccoon City and came to believe the powerful decide who gets saved, who gets blamed, and which deaths disappear into a report. His answer is another virus because nobody in this universe ever processes institutional anger in a normal way. Leon, Claire, and Chris are infected at Alcatraz. Rebecca works on the vaccine while Jill's earlier T-virus history gives her greater resistance to Dylan's strain. The group survives, receives treatment, and defeats Dylan after his fusion with the facility's infected creatures. All 5 leave alive. Rebecca is the practical reason that remains possible. She develops a vaccine from information delivered during the operation and gets it to the island before Dylan's plan finishes. Her field appearances are rarer than the others, but the original Bravo team medic ends up saving 4 of the franchise's most recognizable veterans in one incident. Their bodies carry different histories, their organizations have changed, and Jill has only recently returned to the field. Still, this is the closest the franchise gets to placing the original Survivor generation in one room and saying, yes, they are all here. The obvious missing people are Barry and the Outbreak cast. Barry remains alive after Revelations 2. Alyssa Ashcroft is alive long enough to investigate Dolve and raise Grace. Then Alyssa follows another story into the Wrenwood Hotel in 2018. She does not walk out. Alyssa never stopped digging. Alyssa's survival in Raccoon City gave her 20 years. She used them doing the exact work that had made her dangerous to Umbrella in the first place. She reported on disappearances around Dolve. She interviewed Oswell Spencer before his death. That interview reveals a side of Grace's history she never knew. Spencer's butler Patrick later contacts Alyssa with the will. She does not stumble into motherhood through a random retcon. The same reporter who spent her life interrogating powerful people is personally trusted with the one child Spencer wants kept away from his legacy. Grace was an orphan, adopted by Spencer late in his life. He insisted she was a normal child, not another experiment, and spoke of her as his hope after decades spent chasing human evolution through viruses. In his will, Spencer designated Alyssa as Grace's guardian. Alyssa accepted, gave Grace her surname, and raised her as her daughter. That does not make Spencer a secret good man. His organizations killed thousands, and his late regret cannot touch the scale of it. It does place Grace inside the final decision of a story that began with his research. In 2018, Alyssa and Grace are staying at the Wrenwood Hotel. A hooded attacker cuts the power, murders the manager, and comes after them. Alyssa fights back and tries to get Grace out. She hides material connected to her investigation, including the recording of Spencer. The attacker kills Alyssa in front of Grace. A disposal team arrives afterward and removes evidence. The fire helps them frame the incident as an isolated homicide and arson. Grace survives the hotel physically and spends the next 8 years carrying the memory of her mother's murder. Alyssa's final fate is confirmed dead in 2018. She did not die during Outbreak. She did not vanish with the other playable civilians. She built a career, raised a daughter, and kept a direct line of investigation open from Umbrella to Dulvey and Spencer's final project. And that work is why Grace can eventually understand Elpis. Alyssa may have been targeted because Victor Gideon and the people around him were searching for Grace and the research Spencer left behind. The Wrenwood murder is part of a longer evidence erasure operation, not a random attack on an old survivor. 20 years after Raccoon City, Alyssa's past still knows where to find her. In 2026, Grace returns to Wrenwood while investigating another death. Around the same time, Leon has been following a pattern among surviving victims of Raccoon City. The pattern has already killed several people. Leon started turning. Requiem gives the condition an exact name: latent onset T-virus syndrome. The files usually call it Raccoon City syndrome. Residual T-virus can remain dormant inside a survivor because antibodies keep it suppressed. Over a long enough period, the virus begins adapting to those antibodies. Then it activates. Stage 1 begins with black, bruise-like marks, fatigue, and coughing. Stage 2 spreads the marks, causes numbness, and reaches the internal organs. Victims can begin vomiting blood. At stage 3, movement becomes difficult. The pain becomes severe, and death usually follows within 1 or 2 hours. The cruel part is the dormancy. Stage 0 can look like health because antibodies are holding the infection down. The virus remains active enough to adapt. A survivor can pass medical checks, age normally, and believe the incident is over while the eventual failure is developing invisibly. Leon has it. He is not patient zero for the condition. His investigation begins because other survivors have already died, and the repeated cases are what convince him somebody is studying or exploiting the syndrome. The exact victim list is kept away from the old playable cast, which prevents us from quietly inserting Kevin or Mark into it. The marks appear across his hand. His cough worsens. He contacts Sherry while investigating the Rhodes Hill operation and learns how the syndrome progresses. The man who survived Raccoon City, received treatment through later outbreaks, and kept fighting for 28 years, has been carrying residual T-virus all along. Requiem opens this question through a series of deaths. Leon has been tracking Raccoon City survivors who developed the syndrome. These are people who made it out of the blast zone, lived for decades, and then started dying from the infection everybody assumed they had escaped. This reopens almost every early chapter in the video. Did Kevin receive daylight? Was Mark's infection completely cleared before he returned to his family? What about Jim, George, David, Cindy, and Yoko? Their endings can show them leaving the city. Requiem establishes that antibodies and years without symptoms do not automatically equal eradication. It does not mean every missing Outbreak character secretly died from the syndrome. The game never identifies them as victims. It means their clean status cannot be assumed from an old escape scene. Leon enters the ruined city. While the condition advances through his body, he reaches stage 2 and later stage 3. The black marks spread. He coughs blood. By the time he reaches Ark beneath Raccoon City, he knows his remaining time may be measured in hours. Death Island does not erase this reveal. Rebecca's vaccine treats the engineered strain Dylan uses at Alcatraz. Raccoon City syndrome comes from residual T-virus tied to the 1998 exposure and decades of adaptation. Leon can be successfully treated for one later infection, while an older dormant trace remains inside him. The distinction is easy to miss, but the diseases are not presented as one continuous case. It also explains why routine treatment never caught the final stage in advance. The antibodies suppressing the old virus are part of the mechanism that delays visible symptoms. Once the virus adapts, the timetable collapses very quickly, and Leon still goes in because Elpis may be connected to the survivors who are dying. This is the fake curiosity from the beginning, finally turning physical. Raccoon City was erased from the map. Umbrella fell. Leon built an entire adult life after the outbreak. The virus kept changing inside him. Sherry has spent the same 28 years living with an even more obvious viral legacy. Sherry was next. Sherry understands the danger before most of the cast, because her entire life has been shaped by infection research. Her G-embryo was removed in Nest. The vaccine saved her. Regeneration remained. Government surveillance remained. By RE6, she can recover from injuries that would leave another agent in hospital for months. Requiem brings her back through Leon's communications. She helps him access information from Rhodes Hill and the research on Raccoon City Syndrome. The reports make one thing clear: antibodies can suppress a virus for years while the residual infection learns to resist them. It is a perfect use of Sherry in this story because she has spent her whole life around specialists who claimed her condition was understood. Her regeneration looked stable. Requiem asks whether stable was ever the same as finished. Sherry's case is biologically different from Leon's. She was infected with the G virus, implanted by William, and treated with a specialized vaccine. The story still places her among the people Elpis may help. Leon's final call concerns getting the antiviral to her. That broader effect is one reason Elpis matters beyond a single syndrome report. Spencer's project draws on the long history of umbrella infections and reaches beyond the one patient standing beside the terminal. The ending does not explain every biochemical interaction between Elpis and G-virus cells. It gives the practical answer: Leon believes the remaining supply can treat Sherry, and the release route continues with that plan active. Until another game shows the procedure, Sherry's status stays alive with treatment available. Cured by Elpis would jump ahead of the scene we actually receive. The game is careful with what we actually see. Leon displays the progressive marks and symptoms. Sherry's future risk and need for treatment are discussed. We do not watch her go through Leon's full stage progression on screen. That distinction matters. Sherry is alive at the end of the intended continuation. She has access to a possible treatment. Claiming she definitely reached the same terminal condition before receiving it would add a scene the game does not show. Her return completes a loop from Resident Evil 2. Leon entered government service partly to protect Sherry. In Requiem, he is the infected survivor carrying news of a cure back to her. The person who reaches that cure is Grace, a daughter who never experienced Raccoon City and inherits nearly every unfinished consequence from it. Grace inherited Raccoon. Grace Ashcroft works as an FBI technical analyst. She lives alone, stays close to her office, and has little field experience when her investigation pulls her back to the Wrenwood Hotel. It is the place where Alyssa died. Grace has spent 8 years avoiding the full weight of that night. Requiem forces her through it while connecting the murder to Rhodes Hill, the ruins of Raccoon City, and the ARC facility beneath them. Grace is deliberately less capable in a fight than Leon. She hides, improvises, and struggles to control her panic. Those qualities let the Wrenwood case feel frightening again, even after the franchise has spent decades building agents who can clear a room of mutants before breakfast. Her story intersects with a young girl named Emily. Grace tries to protect her through the outbreak at Rhodes Hill, and Emily becomes the person who pushes Grace to act when fear would normally close her down. The rescue fails in stages. Emily is wounded, dies from blood loss, and mutates. Leon shoots her transformed body while trying to stop the threat. Grace believes she has lost her. The larger investigation leads Grace to Victor Gideon, Zeno, and Elpis. They believe her history makes her the key to Spencer's hidden project. Grace eventually discovers why. Spencer adopted her as a baby and later entrusted her to Alyssa. The keyword is hope. That word has traveled from Spencer to Alyssa, and from Alyssa to Grace. The villains hear a password and assume it unlocks power. Grace understands it as the final human idea shared between the people who raised her. Spencer's recording and Alyssa's hidden evidence give Grace the context the villains lack. They expect another weapon from the founder of Umbrella. Spencer's final project went in the other direction. Grace reaches Pandora inside ARC, while Leon's syndrome approaches its terminal stage. The finale places the decision with the least experienced person in the room, and that works because Grace is the one carrying Alyssa's investigation, Spencer's will, and Emily's apparent death at the same time. She never lived through Raccoon City. She becomes the person deciding whether its surviving infections can finally end. Elpis changed the answer. Requiem gives the player two choices at the Elpis terminal: destroy it or release it. If Grace chooses destruction, ARC begins collapsing. Leon stays behind to protect her and confront Zeno while already dying from Raccoon City syndrome. Zeno overpowers him and shoots him in the head. Grace escapes with the BSAA, Elpis is lost, and the game ends without the extended resolution. Then the game offers the player a reload at the decision. That route is real as an available ending. It behaves like a dead end. There is no completion trophy for it, no final boss, and no post-credits continuation. If Grace chooses to release Elpis, She enters the answer drawn from Spencer's recording: hope. Elpis produces 6 vials. Zeno assumes Spencer hid a super virus and injects himself before Grace can stop him. The substance neutralizes his enhancements and leaves him human. Elpis is an antiviral, the last project of a man whose previous work built Umbrella's entire catalog of disasters. That reveal is satisfyingly embarrassing for Zeno. He reaches the center of Ark, expecting to inherit Spencer's ultimate weapon, and immediately cures the thing, making him superhuman. His certainty about Spencer's motives is exactly why he misreads the project. Victor Gideon kills the now powerless Zeno and mutates, giving Leon one final battle. Grace uses Elpis to cure Leon's Raccoon City syndrome. He recovers instead of dying inside Ark. Chris's people arrive. Umber Eyes and the rescue team extract Leon and Grace. Then the ending starts settling the survivor accounts. Leon tells Grace that Emily may still be saved because he avoided her vital organs. Elpis can reverse the infection. Emily returns to human form, and Grace adopts her, echoing the way Alyssa took Grace in after Spencer's death. Leon also contacts Sherry. There is now an antiviral for her. The available vials matter. Leon's dose does not consume the entire answer. The project can extend beyond the person standing in the room, which is why the ending can credibly point towards Sherry and other surviving subjects instead of treating Leon as the one exceptional rescue. The release route includes the proper final boss, the trophy, and the post-credits material. It is clearly built as the intended continuation, although a future game will be the final authority if Capcom ever decides to complicate it. Elpis cures Leon after 28 years of residual infection. It can save Emily after mutation. It offers treatment to Sherry. For the first time, the franchise presents an answer designed to clear away the biological debt left by its oldest viruses. That sounds like a clean escape. Now we can finally answer who actually received one. Who escaped cleanly? Some Resident Evil survivors did escape their incidents without any confirmed permanent infection. Rebecca leaves the Ecliptic Express and Mansion, becomes a scientist, and remains alive through Death Island. Claire repeatedly receives treatment when exposed and continues her work. Barry builds a life with his family. Ashley has the Plaga removed before it matures and returns home. Sheva and Josh leave Kijuju alive. Bruce and Fong stop the Spencer Rain attack. Many of these people have no confirmed biological condition following them decades later. Clean gets harder once we ask about the rest of their lives. Leon loses his original future to government service and carries Raccoon City syndrome until Elpis cures him. Sherry survives the G-Virus, keeps its regenerative changes, and spends her childhood under state control. Jill receives a vaccine, then has the biological consequences harvested by Wesker. Manuela survives T. Veronica and enters government custody. Natalia leaves the island with Alex Wesker's consciousness apparently emerging inside her. Mia lives after Evelyn, though the exact limits of her treatment remain unclear. Rose keeps her mold powers by choice. Ethan is his own category. His human body dies before the Baker dinner. His mold body lives, loves, and sacrifices itself. His consciousness remains after the second death. He survives as a person more convincingly than he survives as a human organism. Then we have the missing. Billy, Carlos, most of the Outbreak cast, Ark, Lot, Lily, Bruce, Fong, Manuela, Ashley, Sheva, Josh, Helena, and Jake all leave their final confirmed incidents alive or have viable survival routes. Silence protects them from another on-screen outbreak. It gives us no proof of peace. Alyssa is the warning. For years, a newspaper byline made her look like Outbreak's clearest success. Requiem shows the rest of the life. She survives Raccoon City, raises Grace, follows Umbrella's trail, and is murdered 20 years later by people trying to erase that trail. Raccoon City syndrome adds the final complication. Leaving the city and feeling healthy for decades can still end with the virus adapting inside the body. The unnamed survivors Leon investigates escaped the explosion. Their infections did not. So did anyone get a normal life? Mark Wilkins comes closest. In his personal Outbreak ending, he returns to his wife and son. The scene has no recruitment, secret employer, or mutation reveal attached. It is simply a man making it home. Requiem means we cannot guarantee what happened to every trace of virus in his body, and Outbreak's roots stop us from declaring his ending universal. Still, that image is the closest the series gives us to ordinary survival. Elpis changes the future for the people still being tracked. Leon is cured. Sherry can receive treatment. Emily is restored. Grace finishes the investigation Alyssa carried out of Raccoon City and uses Spencer's last project to undo part of what Umbrella began. That is the answer. Some survivors escaped the building. Some escaped the city. A smaller number escaped the infection. Almost nobody received a confirmed life untouched by the organizations, memories, and biological changes that followed. Survival ends the incident. For most of them, the consequences keep going.